Hello everyone, this is the Celtic Girl. So in this video we'll be talking about Olaf or Saint Olaf, and I am going to basically talk about some of the things that he did and everything. So Olaf was born a pagan, he was born a heathen, and he was the great let's see here, he was the great grandchild of the first king of Norway. So that's how he was able to become king, because he came from that bloodline. Olaf was probably one of the most barbaric kings in the Middle Ages. And I am not going to fill this video with wonderful things about these kings. These kings were the epitome of probably everything you do not want to see. Olaf, even though he was born a heathen or a pagan, he converted to Christianity in see, I think it says it was Denmark that he converted. So anyways, Olaf, when he came back to Norway, his goal was to Christianize Norway. And he did it by basically having these edicts or these laws passed that basically said that you could not practice your ancestral religion. You could not give sacrifices to the gods. And if we find out that you are doing this, that you will be killed for it, or you will be exiled. And exile was actually a lot better than being killed, because exile meant you lived another day and another and another until you probably died of old age or starvation. But Olaf was not a good man, and scholars unify in their belief that Olaf was probably one of the worst. Charlemagne started the Viking Age, and I'm not talking about that he raided. I'm talking about that he had, I believe I read, over 100,000 Anglo-Saxon decapitated, because he found out that they were in fact still practicing their ancestral religion. And this is how much these Christianized kings feared paganism. And it gets me about these people like Charlemagne, who are, Charlemagne is like looked on as this, this great man, when in fact he was not great. And it's very, very, apparent that he did a lot of things that people in that country are very proud of. But if you talk to anyone who practices heathenism, they will say that Charlemagne was probably one of the worst. And there were a series of really, really nasty and bad kings. But Olaf is probably the most notorious of them, because he tried to actually eradicate the religion of the gods by torturing, by putting a bowl of hot coals on this gentleman's stomach, which he is honored with his own day. The snake that I mentioned in the previous video. Not exactly something that a civilized man would do. And we look at civilized rulers and we say, okay, that is what we want. But according to Wikipedia, and I will be absolutely abundantly clear on Wikipedia, Wikipedia is not exactly the best source of information, but a lot of times these are actually written by people that know what they're talking about. And basically it says here, traditionally Olaf has been seen as leading the Christianization of Norway. However, most scholars of the period will now recognize that Olaf himself had little to do with the Christianization process. Olaf brought with him Grimkel, who is usually credited with helping Olaf create expulsal, I can't pronounce it, sees and further organizing the Norwegian church. Grimkel, however, was only a member of Olaf's household, and no permanent sees were created until 1100. Also, Olaf and Grimkel most likely did not introduce new laws to Norway, but these were ascribed to Olaf at a later date. Olaf most likely did try to bring Christianity to the interior of Norway, where it was less prevalent. And then it talks about, also questions have been raised with the nature of Olaf's Christianity itself. It seems that Olaf, like many Scandinavian kings, used his Christianity to gain more power for the monarchy and centralized control in Norway. The verses attributed to Olaf do not speak of Christianity at all, but in fact use pagan references to describe romantic relationships, in some circles this being because Olaf likely had many wives. So, just by hearing that, Olaf wasn't exactly practicing a pure form of Christianity, because he had multiple wives, and polygamy was outlawed by the church. And then of course it says here, this one author of The Conversion of Scandinavia tries to make sense of this problem by arguing that there was a long process of assimilation in which the Scandinavians adopted one by one over time individual Christian practices. And it says that he certainly does not say that Olaf was not Christian, but he argues that we cannot think of any Scandinavians as quickly converting in a full way as portrayed in later sagas. Olaf himself is portrayed in later sources as a saintly, miracle-working figure to help support the quick view of conversion for Norway, although the historical Olaf did not act this way, as seen especially in the verses attributed to him. And it talks about his sainthood and talking about, like, him and another person who has the same name was traditionally regarded as the driving force behind Norway's final conversion to Christianity. And so it is interesting when you read this, because it helps you to understand this period of time. But Olaf was evil. He was a sadistic murderer. He took land from people that died a pagan. His monks delighted in this particular process. And this is the same pro quo of a lot of your very, very sadistic kings. Charlemagne was sadistic. I don't care about what he supposedly did for his country. He was a sadist. He was a murderer. He was a purveyor of genocide, like cultural genocide, which is a war crime. So these kings were guilty of war crimes. They had no love for their people, even though their people later on loved them. I think it's more like Stockholm Syndrome, personally, where you have these kings that do these horrific, horrible things that that remind you of the Islamic State, and yet they're put on this high pedestal and they're admired as though they're like some kind of god or something. So it is very, very, brutal. And he was one of many kings who were brutal during the Middle Ages. and he did not care. He believed, as most people who practice a radical form of any kind of religion, that when he died, he would go to heaven, and he would be with, his God and everything. But most people who practice heathenism will agree that Olaf is down there, and he is being tortured in Helheim, and yeah. Alright, so I'm going to end it there. I hope that this video shed some light. I hope that it was informative, and I'll be back tomorrow with, let me see here, today is the 10th day. Yeah, I'll be back with my 12 days of Yule, day 10, and we're going to be wrapping up this wonderful, wonderful 12 days pretty soon. So I'll see you around. Bye.